way down over his ears, some hair is
Following
going
day,
to show.
December 8th, he was sentenced
In the year 1976, 46 years ago, Virgil Presnell was sentenced to death for the murder. Welcome back to the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. The final execution of this year, 2022, is scheduled for December 15th. That is the date that the state of Oklahoma has set to put to death John Fitzgerald Hanson, who was convicted in that state for 2 murders he and an accomplice committed in Tulsa in the year 1999. There's just one problem. Oklahoma doesn't have custody of John Hanson. He's in Louisiana. Hanson is in the custody of the United States federal government as their prisoner, serving a life sentence for various robberies that he was convicted of in a federal court. As it turns out, Oklahoma has put in a request to the United States Bureau of Prisons to transfer John Hanson to them, but that bureau is refusing to hand him over. As a result, Oklahoma is suing the Federal Bureau of Prisons for custody. A lawsuit was filed by Oklahoma State Attorney General John O'Connor, ordering the transfer of John Hanson back to Oklahoma by November the 9th from a federal prison in Louisiana. We are now past that date, and it did not happen. Hanson also had a clemency hearing set for that date in Oklahoma, and that obviously did not occur either. Oklahoma requires clemency hearings for death row inmates to be scheduled 21 days before the scheduled execution. That means that Oklahoma officials now have until November 24th to hold a clemency hearing, or there will be no execution on December 15th. Oklahoma is accusing the United States Bureau of Prisons of playing politics with this matter. In a report from the AP news agency, it states, the United States Justice Department under Democratic President Joe Biden, who has vowed to work to end the death penalty, announced last year that it was halting federal executions. That step came after a historic use of capital punishment under Donald Trump's presidency, with 13 executions by the federal government carried out in 6 months. The Bureau of Prisons' refusal to turn over John Hanson raises questions about whether the agency is using its power to deliver on the president's political pledge. Okay, let's talk about why Oklahoma wants custody of John Hanson so that they can execute him. During the early afternoon hours on August 31st, 1999, John Hanson and Victor Cornell Miller robbed 2 liquor stores. They then wanted to commit another robbery, but they needed a car. Sometime about 4:30 that afternoon, outside the Tulsa Promenade Mall in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 2 men spotted 77-year-old Mary Bowles walking outside the mall. They grabbed Mary Bowles and placed her in the rear seat of her car, a tan-colored Buick LeSabre, where John Hanson held her down while Victor Miller drove. Miller drove the car to a secluded area in North Tulsa County near a town called Owasso, to a dirt pit where truckers load their trucks with soil to be delivered. The owner of that dirt pit and trucking company, a man named Jerald Max Thurman, who was 44 years old, was there getting ready to load his truck for delivery. He stopped the truck on the road leading to the dirt pit and was speaking to his nephew on a cell phone while outside the truck. He told his nephew that he was looking at a car going through the dirt pit. Soon after that conversation ended, the driver of the car, Victor Miller, shot Jerald Thurman 4 times. It's not clear if Miller got out of the car or if he shot while he was still driving. Now, also, some reports on this case are saying that Jerald Thurman as a Good Samaritan, had attempted to intervene in the carjacking and kidnapping of Mary Bowles, but from most reports, including those filed in court, that doesn't appear to be the case. It seems to be a situation where Thurman was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Hanson and Miller wanted to eliminate a witness. Victor Miller then drove the car from the dirt pit a short distance away to a heavily weeded area along the side of the road. Mary Bowles was removed from the car, and John Hanson shot her several times. The men then tried to cover her body with some brush and fallen branches. Back at the dirt pit, witnesses in the area had heard gunshots and saw the car that Miller and Hanson were in driving away. When they went over to investigate, they came upon Jerald Thurman lying on the road by his dump truck. He wasn't dead, but he was unconscious. Police and paramedics arrived, and Thurman was hurried to a hospital. Mary Bowles' decomposing body was found about a week later, on September 7th. And about a week after that, on September 14th, Jerald Thurman died while still in a coma at the hospital. He had never regained consciousness. On the day of the killings, 2 weeks earlier, Hanson and Miller had driven Mary Bowles' car to the Oasis Motel and rented a room there, with John Hanson providing his driver's license to the motel desk clerk. They later had trouble starting Mary Bowles' car and borrowed some tools from that desk clerk, who later saw the two men working on the car until giving up on it. The desk clerk stated that the two men then disappeared. They never came back, and he never saw them again. Hanson and Miller robbed another liquor store 3 days later, on September 3rd. And on September the 8th, they robbed a Federal Credit Union bank. And that was what would get them the life in prison sentences by the federal government. On September 9th, a patrol officer spotted Mary Bowles' car still parked in the Oasis Motel parking lot. Upon further investigation, police learned who was using that car when a motel employee provided information on John Hanson, who had checked into the motel 9 days earlier. Also on September the 9th, the day the car was found, Victor Miller's wife called police to tell them that her husband and John Hanson are the two men that they are looking for that robbed the Federal Credit Union Bank, and that they are staying at the Econo Lodge Motel in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Police arrived at the Econo Lodge to make the arrest. Victor Miller came out voluntarily, but John Hanson refused to do so and was forced out with tear gas. Inside the motel room, John Hanson had hidden the two guns used to kill Jerald Thurman and Mary Bowles in the bathroom toilet's water tank. Ballistics proved those guns to have been the murder weapons. Both John Hanson and Victor Miller's fingerprints were also found in Mary Bowles' car. Both men were eventually convicted and sentenced to death in Oklahoma for the two murders. The federal government then convicted and sentenced both men to life in prison for the bank robbery. Following multiple appeals from Victor Miller over the years, officials in Oklahoma and the families of the murder victims, tired of continually having to return to court, and with many of the testifying witnesses no longer alive or that couldn't be found, they agreed to drop the death penalty sentence against Miller and settled on life without parole for him. 59-year-old Victor Miller is currently incarcerated at the Oklahoma State Reformatory in Granite, Oklahoma. However, as I said earlier, at the time that this video is being made, John Hanson is still being held by the federal government at one of their prisons located in Louisiana, and they refuse to let him be transferred to Oklahoma for that state to execute him. We will have to wait and see what happens. I'll provide updates in the description below. By the way, for some reason, the feds have Hanson listed under a different name, showing him as George John Hanson. I don't know what the story is behind that, but it didn't seem to be important. If you would like to see more of these death row stories, please subscribe so that you are alerted when the next one comes out. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.